Please join me in welcoming Professor Dr. Oliver Rathkolb.
Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. You see my face is blooming already. Yeah? I know it's very hard, 9:30 after such a wonderful concert. Therefore, I decided, in order to have a chance to present my boring lecture, to get you back to Viennese music, a wonderful piece. Some of you might know it. You can hear it in the third man. But it's, again, a waltz, a wonderful waltz of a nice cafe in Vienna near the State Opera, the Café Mozart. Waltz here just to get us back to 1949. Introduction to my lecture, which will deal with 1949. What I will try today, and I appreciate the invitation by Franz Stephan, is to present you three different levels for 1949. I will briefly touch the most important international events, but also I will briefly try to focus on important issues and developments in Austrian political history. And then I will go on the third level onto the micro level of the history of the summer school, which you will hear later on, did not really start in Strobl, but somewhere else here. And the second approach I chose was not just to analyze briefly the events in the 30 minutes, but also try to elaborate what is still existing. Yeah? I think we must be aware of the fact that 75 years are nothing with regard to human mankind, including European, Austrian, and Strobl history. Still, many remnants of this period are very relevant to our history today, be it on the level of geopolitics, be it on the level of Austrian history. This thing doesn't work either here today. But again, you know, 49, we not only have this wonderful music from Anton Karas for the famous spy movie, The Third Man, but also it's the anniversary, the 5th anniversary of the death of Johann Strauss. But let's go back to international policy. What you can see here is a classical propaganda marketing poster from 74, trying to show from the point of view of the communists how Comic-Con worked, which was founded on January 25th under the protection and under the initiative of the Soviet Union to try to find a model of economic cooperation and to counter the positive effects of the European Recovery Program of the Marshall Plan. I think what's very interesting, I cannot go into the economic details, and Professor Neidek would immediately correct me, but the main, I think, difference is that the Marshall Plan really tried to revive the historical economic structures of the different nation states, and at the same time also bring them into a close cooperation, into a European network, as you can see here from this contemporary poster from the Marshall Plan. The Council for Mutual Economic Assistance, dominated by the Soviet Union in the beginning, was just concentrated on bilateral state of the socialist nationalized industries and agricultures with some credit agreements. It improved a little bit in the 1960s, also focusing on infrastructure projects like railroad or electricity power plant, and also friendship oil transportation. But in general, the European Recovery Program was much more advanced because it was really deeply rooted in building up existing structures. You can see here the geopolitical importance of Austria, which from these 13.3 billion US dollars received 1 billion, and most of the money was invested in the western provinces of Austria under the occupation of the US, Britain, and France, and only 10% approximately in the eastern zone. In 1949, as you can see here, still Austria had quite a large number of economic problems. I just picked out the figures with regard to agricultural products. The real boom, I think, for Austria started in 1954. By the way, the Marshall Plan still exists. This is, I think, a good example because the so-called counterpart funds were turned over to the Austrian government in 1964 after a highly delicate corruption scandal involving the largest Austrian bank, the Kreditanstalt Bankverein, the Austrian parliament. But as always in Austrian history, corruption comes, corruption goes. The positive effect is that the ERP funds are still available. And right now, I think per year they could, in theory, work with 500 million euros here. Back to the international scene. Here we'll go into another important trend in the year 1949. There was a very strong peace movement all over, not only Western Europe, but also in the US. Here you have a demonstration against a peace conference organized in New York in March 1949. On the one hand, I think it was a legitimate feeling of the people of the time after the development of the atomic bomb and the dropping of the two bombs over Japan. People really feared a third world war. On the other hand, this peace movement was instrumentalized and misused by the communists and the Soviet Union in particular. I chose this issue here in New York. By the way, the Waldorf Astoria right now is turned down and will become an apartment building here. There is no continuity anymore. But this was the key figure during this conference, one of the most important and very well-known Soviet composers in the US here. His works were forbidden in the Soviet Union at the time, and Stalin himself called him and made a dirty deal. Yeah? Your works will be available again, but you have to move to New York, and he followed Stalin. Also, his relationship to Stalinism and communism is highly complex, but in this sense, he was really pressed by Stalin here. In general, we can say that the peace movement was quite strong within general public, not only within communists, but also when you focus on the peace movement in Austria, there were many intellectuals also following this movement. But as I have said, unfortunately, it was occupied by geopolitics and Stalin. And when Stalin died in 1953, peace was over. No issue anymore in the propaganda. This is a strong continuity in Austrian political history, which is a major difference to all other European, Western European countries. When we take Western Germany, where the political structure was established within the Federal Republic of Germany in 1949 too. I will come back to this again. The Allies made quite clear you can have parties, but no party which is openly addressing former Nazi party members and is including high-level former Nazis in the party. In the case of Austria, it's different. The reason is typically Austrian. As you know, we had two major parties in 1945, the People's Party leading, then very strong, over 40%, the Social Democrats, then a 5% small party, the Communists. And the problem in the Great Coalition always was that they were more or less tied together. And especially the Social Democrats tried very hard to find a strong third party to put pressure on the People's Party and lobby it with the Western allies in the US and especially in Britain to get this so-called League of Independent Party accepted. The leadership was not really heavily involved with the Nazi past, had a semi-liberal appearance, but when you go to the election campaign, and therefore I brought this poster for you, it was quite clear it was aiming at so-called Neuwähler, new voters. And new voters were 400,000 former Nazi party members who were not allowed to vote. And this is a clear-cut continuity because the League of Nations was taken over then, and then the whole former leadership was changed, and here you have the leading figures of the Freedom Party, which emerged with the League of Independence in 1955. Stendebach, a former colonel of the German army, Wilfried Gredler, a member of the stormtroopers and the Nazi Party before 1938, later on Austrian ambassador to Beijing, by the way, and Heinrich Zechmann has been a member of the Nazi Party already in 1930. This is, I think, a continuity, and we struggle with the problem till today. Yeah, I already mentioned the establishment of the Federal Republic of Germany was a complete surprise. When you analyze the post-war plannings of the US, of Britain, also the vague preparations of the Soviet Union, it was always quite clear Germany has to be controlled for a long time. Especially the Americans were interested in an elite change, getting rid of former Nazi party members and having democratic politicians, but also media manager in charge of the new German state here. But because of the Cold War, the pressure extremely increased, and especially the Americans tried to get a government for the so-called tri-zone, that means American zone of occupation, French and business, and French and British zone as soon as possible after 1945 in order to relieve the pressure to get American troops out of Europe. It was important to have a strong Western German state, which will be the nucleus for German army. Already in the late 40s, for the American strategic planners on all levels, White House, State Department, National Security Council, it was quite clear. The only option to establish a strong military resistance against the possible communist Soviet move to the West is to have the Germans rearmed and have the Germans integrated in a strong army here. I cannot go into the details of the Constitution, the basic law. I think what's important is it's a completely different Constitution compared with the Weimar Constitution. That's also the big difference to the Austrian system. We still stick on the Constitution 1920 in the form of 1929. In the case of Germany, especially the Americans pressed very hard that must be a strong constitution defending democracy and also strengthening the provinces in order to get rid of the centralization which dominated both the Weimar Republic and the Nazi state here. By the way, in the same year, in 1949, for the first time, former SS members formed an association, and also the former Wehrmacht officers began to build up already lobbying institutions. And when the old key politician, the Christian social conservative Konrad Adenauer, presented his speech, he did not focus on the Nazi past. He did not focus on restitution, on the victims of the Shoah. This came quite later. The reason is that especially within his party, the CSU, the Bavarian part of the Christian Democrats, heavily refused any form of restitution and compensation, as it happened then with the Luxembourg Treaty in 1952. Then we have the follow-up in October 1949, the communist state, the German Democratic Republic here. Already, I think, in 1946, 1947, it was quite clear that also the Soviet Union was moving towards separation, forced unification of parties. They started also socialization of industry, agriculture, and this was only a formal move to have a second German state established. This seems to be history. You all know this famous picture here, Wolfgang Schäuble, who unfortunately died recently, and the State Secretary Günter Krause signed the Unification Treaty of 1990. The two German states, history? No. Presence. Let's look at the political debates, political culture in Germany. Let's look at the new parties, the AfD, the Linke, the new Bündnis, Sarah Wagenknecht, Vernunft und Gerechtigkeit. The history is still dominating German domestic policies. Now the next important issue is NATO, the NATO treaty here. This, by the way, is a really strong image here from the White House, President Truman signing the NATO treaty surrounded by representatives of the other NATO members here. Here you see the development of NATO, relatively small in 1949, then increasing until 1982, and then the developments until the present. NATO, as you know, still exists. Did it change? No. This is a symbolic picture. Who is in charge? The US. full stop. There have been, however, other projects, which I just briefly will mention, which did not work out already since the 1950s. Here again, the US, which really played an important role for European integrations on all levels. Yeah? In order to strengthen Europe, they pressed very hard for an European defense community, a highly complicated system here in trying to find a way to especially convince the French political representatives to accept the Germans. The Americans had a very pragmatic policy. Let's keep the Germans in. If the Germans are in, we can control them. Yeah? And they really control NATO, including Germany. And Germany, as you know, has no atomic weapons. But despite really heavy pressure, the French National Assembly in 1954 decided to postpone the decision. That means if France decides, or the new French National Assembly, to restart the debate on this treaty, suddenly we could have a legal problem, because maybe then the European defense community comes into being, and would be an interesting issue if suddenly this comes out of the dark. As you can see, it's something like a possibility, at least in theory, but we could discuss on the issue of a European army maybe later. I come back to Austria here. That's also, I think, for Austrian history, an important change in the political environment. Until 1948, the policy of the four allies was quite clear. Austria, like Germany, has to be demilitarized. Police, yes. Army, no go. It changed after the communist takeover in Prague in 1948 with the establishment of a small police army system within the Austrian coalition government. But then in 1949, the Americans made it quite clear on the level of the National Security Council, no Austrian state treaty without an Austrian army under US support. That means the remilitarization of Austria was finally decided in 1949. And as you know, we still have an army, and the same army like in 1955, an army with universal draft here. This is, I think, the key decision of 1949, the decision of the Soviet leaders to not only continue working on a nuclear bomb, but to try it out. It was a secret operation here in northern Kazakhstan. No press statement, nothing else, only the CIA, based on military intelligence, realized that the Soviets now also have a nuclear bomb like the US. This completely changed the power system of the Cold War, and this is what we are facing undercover still today. This is the most recent map on the estimated global nuclear warhead inventories, and still there might be in the next years a newcomer due to failed negotiations. This is Iran. This is something what we completely erase from our memories and thinking, like our fathers, mothers, grandfathers, mothers. We try to neglect the fact that we still sit on a global nuclear all-out war. But to come to positive developments and continuities, this is the history of Strobl. Here again, you have the hidden hand policy of the US. The US administration and the US occupation forces have developed a large exchange of persons program in order to get Austrian experts to the US, also bring American experts and students to Austria in order to overcome the remnants of National Socialism and authoritarian regimes, a very effective systems. And here you have an important decision maker of the Sommerhochschule, Otto Kauders. He was professor of psychiatry at the University of Graz. He was kicked out of his position by the National Socialist regime, also partly because his wife was Jewish. He went to the US for 1 year, and then something which I could not really find out why, he came back and stayed under miserable conditions in the Ostmark during the Nazi regime since 1940. But he was really an important actor here in establishing the Sommerhochschule. In the first session, the main aim was to get American students here to Austria, not to Strobl yet, but to Zell am See. These are some of the students of the class of 1949, all Americans, a large number of female students, by the way, would be quite different at that time on the Austrian side. The Austrians continued this program looking for new headquarters because they first had been at a hotel in Thomasbach near Zell am See. They are now looking for a new hotel, Schloss Internat, a big building for 200 persons, and you clearly can see the Cold War. The Americans didn't trust to have a summer school in the Soviet zone of occupation or in Vienna, and they were successful. The next class took place in the wonderful castle here. Maybe we could at one point have a visit at the former headquarters of the Sommerhochschule here. Nice building owned by the Republic of Austria, and I think still a school is there here. And 52 students for the first time, 8 Austrians and 2 Swiss students. In order to sum up, to come in an end, you see the outstanding strategic importance of Austria in between the bloc systems in 49. This also is the reason why so much money was poured into Austrian economy, because to stabilize the country in the Western system. The most important after the Soviet atomic bomb, and maybe even more important decision of 49, is this image here and what is beside the Communist Party under Mao Zedong establishes the People's Republic of China. This is, I think, for our days, the most important event of 1949. China today is an economic global power. When we take the initiative of China and also the hidden hand control of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization covering 40% of the world population, you see this is the beginning of a global power. And we also see that 49 is much closer than we think. This man only very few of you might know. I think even some of our Chinese students will not know him. It's an important man. He is the father of the current president of China and general secretary of the Chinese Communist Party, Xi Jinping, and he was a close collaborator of Mao in 1949, later on several times purged, like his son and family, Xi Jinping, and today his son is president of China, and you also see how close 49 is to today's policy. This, I'm coming to the end, is something which the Western industrial world completely neglects. Yeah? Colonization is over. It's the history of the 19th century, maybe the history until 1945. Since then, everybody has become independent. Everything is in order, be it politically, be it on the economic scene. But still, colonialism is an important issue which, unfortunately, as I have said, is not really taken into account in global politics today. It's an issue in the former colonized countries. I brought you also a very strong picture of 49 with regard to the Netherlands handing over the colonies to the Republic of Indonesia, but also you see here still the former power of the colonizers, and I think in the next generations will much more deal with the issue of continuing cultural, economic, and political memories and structures from the time of the colonies. Now, to come to an end, I try now to give you a historical final roundup with a British newsreel. It's propaganda poor. I will not comment it, but you will see it immediately, and I hope this thing works. Yeah? I'm sorry. I apologize for this marketing.
Ohne Blue Star brauchst du einen Roboter, der deine Toilette sauber und frisch hält.
Aber Blue Star hat...
You know, as a historian, I'm not really well equipped in handling these movies, including the marketing here. But fortunately, we have an outstanding...
Einfacheres.
Blue Star kraftaktiv hält deine Toilette mit jeder Spülung rund um die Uhr sauber und frisch. Das muss ich haben. Jetzt probieren.
So, fortunately, we're maybe...
Through 12 months dark with conflict, 1949, like all years, leaves its message for posterity. It was written in Washington by the representatives of 12 nations. It was countersigned across the freedom-loving world by 330 million people. Strength in peace for the prevention of war. That was the message of the Atlantic Pact, the message of the year. Results from this show of strength came quickly. The effectiveness of the giant airlift, allied with the Western world's determination to stand firm, forced the Russians to lift their inhuman blockade of Berlin. The international horizon seemed suddenly brighter on that April night on the Autobahn, when after 11 months of fingers on triggers, East was again linked with West. The Atlantic Pact nations had proved themselves powerful enough to enforce Europe's right for peace. That was the lesson of Berlin. Normal conditions returned to the city, but not law and order. Soon, German was fighting German, with a railway strike trumped up by the Russians, the cause of it all. The Reds were busy elsewhere, too. In China, communism scored its greatest victory since the coup in Czechoslovakia. Troops of Mao Zedong marched into Shanghai unopposed. Within weeks, they were at the gates of Hong Kong. Troops went out from Britain to reinforce the garrison. Hong Kong was determined to stay British. With China almost theirs, Moscow and the 14 men in the Kremlin found 1949 mixing the bitter with the sweet. Though they possessed the world's biggest army and the secret of the atom bomb, they were faced by a united Western world, ready to halt the spread of Stalin's empire by force if need be. Stalin had to face trouble within his camp too. Yugoslavia, the Red's gateway to the Mediterranean, stepped out from behind the Iron Curtain. Tito became independent, and the West moved cautiously to help him in his stand against Stalin.
So, also partly even Tito is present if you analyze politics in the succession states of Yugoslavia, and sometimes, and that's strange to say for a historian, really history is a dangerous instrument to really manipulate people in order to succeed in political aims now. So now the whole thing is completely struck, but I will, obviously it was too much military marching, but you will see two additional slides, and then we are at the end. I'm coming back to the microhistory. In 1955, the Republic of Austria bought this property here, and you will see a nice image you might recognize from the dock towards the former Grand Hotel, which is no Grand Hotel, but a shame for Strobl architecture. But this Bürgergut, which was owned by a prominent member of a Czech Jewish family, Pečnek, was looted by the National Socialist regime in 38-39, and then after 45, for some time, was a children's center for Shoah survivors and administered by the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee. And later on, there were Russian DPs here, and then in 55, after the restitution to the Peček family, it was bought by the Republic in Austria in order to house the Sommerhochschule. Here you have nice images from the brochure, and I think in the afternoon we will get the chance of a new book, a very elaborated one on the long history of the Sommerhochschule. I will end with something which has to do with care. We heard and discussed it intensively yesterday. I think this is also a good image to finish to show that things have changed. The University of Vienna is not only a top-level European university. A large number of our faculties are also in the top global rankings, and the law school also has really an outstanding reputation in the international scenery. This was quite different after 45 as a result of policies which started pre-1938, pre-Nazi takeover. And I took this image to give you a feeling of the university in 49, poor, old-fashioned, man-only, and not really in the first league of international science. The key problem of the university was the issue of reintegration of former Nazi professors. Many of them not even have been Nazi party members, but were aggressive anti-Semites per se, and therefore could not be denazified. And this man here played a highly problematic role, the rector Richard Meister, in getting former Nazi party member and also ideological Nazis very soon back into the Academy of Science. This, I think, has completely changed. I think the university over the last decades under Rector Ebenbauer, Engel, and also the new rector, Schütze, tried very hard. Also, Franz Stefan Meisel with a team organized a really critical, open exhibition on National Socialism, but also the pre-38 policies at the University of Vienna. And also we try very hard at the Forum Zeitgeschichte to deal with the authoritarian, anti-Semitic and Nazi past of the university. And I think this is a good example that change can happen. And the Sommerhochschule of the University of Vienna in Strobl plays an important role also in the international opening up. Thank you so much.